Welcome to the Boulder Criminal Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Elena Nicole, and today I'm here with Ian McDavid. Ian is a Boulder-based criminal defense attorney who has represented thousands of clients and taken over 40 cases to jury trial. And in this episode, we'll be breaking down the real-world legal side of DUI, from what actually happens during a traffic stop to how these cases are built, challenged, and decided on in court. So Ian, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Let's dive right in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Elena.
As far as hiring an attorney, at what point would someone be looking into that?
So when you're charged with a DUI, you should generally hire an attorney. And that's for a few reasons. The first is this: it's a stressful time. These DUIs they're actually routine. Most of them work out in a pretty similar way. You worry about the level of impairment, you worry about the facts, of course, but the sort of the legal issues generally are always pretty straightforward. And most lawyers who are worth their salt are going to be pretty good at those nuances. They're going to be able to help you figure out those tricks for kind of expediting your way to get back on the road and get back with your life, right? So, for example, that whole piece about going and doing your classes early, that's not a thing that people would necessarily want to do on their own, right? Like going essentially starting the penalty now. A lot of people try to avoid penalties, whereas I'm telling people, hey, go start on the penalty now so you don't have to do it later.
Yeah, absolutely. And when someone is going to look, what are the types of things that you should look for and you should ask?
So when you're looking to hire a lawyer, there's a few things that you should look for. The first is their proximity to the courthouse that you have to go to. In our firm, we're about a 10-minute walk from the courthouse in Boulder. And that's really nice because that means I'm not charging my clients a ton of money to get from my office to court. You'll find law firms that'll assign lawyers who are like down in Colorado Springs to go up to Boulder for their case, and ask those lawyers how they charge for that. Look at your legal bills, things like that. You want to ask those questions in terms of like, what are we really going to get charged for? You also want to ask, what does the lawyer know about the place that you're going to go to court? Are you picking a lawyer who's got a really good reputation? They've got a really good name. Maybe they're famous and they're in the news, but that lawyer just does not know anything about doing DUI work. They're probably not a good fit. Or likewise, if that lawyer just isn't working in the town, doesn't have any experience in the town where you're going, they might know the law really well, and they might actually be a perfectly fine attorney. They'll probably get you the same result as somebody else would, but I'd worry about how much they're going to cost, and I'd also worry a little bit about their return on investment. Do you have that lawyer who knows this is how the courthouse is going to do it, so we're going to do it this way in order to not have confusion and time wasted?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really good points. Let's talk a little bit more about implied consent. We touched on it a little bit at the beginning of our conversation, but what is implied consent and how does it affect a driver's rights during a DUI investigation?
So implied consent is that idea that by the act of driving on the roads in Colorado, you have already consented to law enforcement taking a test of your breath or your blood. And that's just the act of driving is, under Colorado law, your consent to be tested. So when you are stopped and asked, hey, you've already consented this, so what are you going to do? And then you refuse, law enforcement gets to essentially hit you with, okay, well, you're refusing, you've already consented, so we're going to revoke your license. And that's kind of how that works, is it's a way to compel compliance with the blood testing law.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about DUI defense strategies. So what are the most effective legal defense strategies used in DUI cases, and which types of cases are the most defensible?
Yeah, and this is a great question, and it kind of goes back to that question of why you should hire a lawyer. So there's sort of two defenses to DUIs. There are a few more, but the two that most people are going to use is, number one, they weren't driving, right? For whatever reason, they weren't in the car, they weren't driving the car, and that sounds a little silly, but then you start to see there are all kinds of times when people aren't driving but still get DUIs. The other defense is they weren't drunk or they weren't impaired. And for either of those two defenses, we're looking at very, very different strategies, right? So for your what I call a no-drive DUI, you're trying instead to really attack the idea that person was number one, doing anything wrong in the first place, because I think people have a pretty good moral compass for what's right and what's wrong, and objectively it is not immoral for somebody to sleep in their car on a cold night if they're under the influence, so long as they're lawfully parked in a parking space somewhere, and who cares? They're not hurting anybody. But the distinction between that person and somebody who is passed out in the middle of an intersection where you can't actually prove that they drove because nobody saw it happen, but they didn't get there drunk in their car, by a tornado or something. That's where you really got to look at that distinction between a no drive defense, because your lawyer is going to be able to tell you, are we more like the guy that's passed out in the middle of the road, or are we more like that person that's really got a good no drive defense because they're clearly not actually driving despite being in their vehicle.
Yeah, legally, is there anywhere in the vehicle that you can be if you are impaired?
Yes and no, right? So it's not a in the vehicle test. It's called actual physical control, and it's a factor test. So what's more important, being the location in the vehicle is one factor there, but they're also looking at where are your car keys? What's the vehicle's shifter doing? How's the driver positioned? Like, what are they doing in the car? And it's a question that's usually got to go to a jury as far as, was this actual physical control of the vehicle or not? So, if you're in that situation, a couple things to do is, park your car somewhere safe, of course. Get out and put your keys somewhere else. Put them on the tire. Put them somewhere out of the car. Hopefully, you don't need them to stay warm, but get them away from there. Don't you sit in the driver's seat either. Go sit in the passenger seat. Go sit in the back. Those types of things just make it really clear to anybody who comes up that you're not moving the vehicle. Yeah, the police look for all of that, and all of those things are good, because it's just a question of what can you argue, and everything you can do to make that argument stronger, the better your case is going to be in the end if it pops up.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but so can an attorney use a defendant's medical records or prescription history as part of a legitimate DUI defense? Have you seen that happen?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've seen that before. I've done it before myself.
Yeah. And is it typically effective?
Yeah, I won that case. The idea is, like, you might have a little bit more access to your own medical history than law enforcement does. Sometimes you are impaired, you go to the hospital and you deny the law enforcement's blood test, but then you take one at the hospital. Frequently those tests don't come back the way that I want them to. But when they do, it is wonderful to be able to go to the prosecutor with, well, we actually have the results. They're just not quite in the way that you wanted them, and they're really good for us.
Is there anything else that you think is helpful for people to know who are listening when it comes to working with an attorney, selecting an attorney, things they should look for?
So look for how that law firm, as best you can, operates, right? So we talked already about, like, the distance to the court-ish piece. But the other things to think about are, number one, how are you getting a hold of that lawyer? Is that lawyer contacting you directly? Are they having, like, a paralegal contact you? How does that paralegal bill? What are they really charging you, and what's their hourly rate? People talk about lawyers being expensive, and of course we are. But what is their sort of justification for the rate? How do they talk to you about their billing? And I bring this up because you'll get law firms that will put out those really attractive, like, low retainers, right? Like a $1,200 initial retainer on a DUI, and then they'll charge $400 an hour for that lawyer. Well, that's 3 hours of lawyer time for your case. That's maybe a trip to court, and maybe one look through your discovery, and then they need more money. So have that conversation with them. How much is my retainer actually going to get me, and what is your sort of vision for where we're going to get with that retainer? Don't be afraid to talk about money with your lawyer, because it's ultimately your money, and they're choosing how to spend that when they choose how to spend their time, and you got to keep them accountable for it.
Yeah, definitely. As far as the impact of, a DUI or DWAI, what have you seen, where have you seen it impact people's lives where maybe they don't expect it? Of course, we expect the license, the volunteer work, the cost, but what about careers and just other areas of life that sometimes we don't think about when this is happening?
It's devastating, and it's widespread, right? So, using myself as an example, as a lawyer, I need a car to get to work to drive. So if I catch a DUI, I got an immediate problem. I've had people who are, they work at the airport, they're baggage handlers. They have to drive a little, like, baggage taxi things. All of a sudden they lose their job, or they have to be reassigned. People who are, pilots, for example, they cannot get a DUI. If you're a pilot and you get charged with a DUI, you need to get a lawyer ASAP. The lots of different professions have collateral consequences that can be affected by DUI. It really just, it can follow you in all kinds of places across all kinds of different professions and lifestyles.
In your experience, just in your line of work, not even necessarily with your clients, but how often does a DUI case get dropped?
1 in 20. Maybe more, maybe less. It really just depends. It depends on what happened in your case. If it's a garden variety, real standard DUI where, breath test, admissions, open container in the car, like those usually don't get dropped. But if it's that no drive, if it's that, that one where law enforcement really takes 4 hours to ever charge you with the DUI, those are the ones where it's way more likely that they're going to get dropped.
So it sounds like it's less, not so much in the person's control. It's kind of the outlying circumstances that may happen. Like you said, the several hours to charge or, something else that might happen. That's typically when a case gets dropped.
Yeah, DUIs are by design highly scripted events, and anytime the script doesn't get followed is where we win. So that's why I say, like, don't do the voluntary roadsides, because that's part of the script. And if you can keep them off the script, so long as you don't refuse the test, that's a good place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So last kind of area we'll talk about a little bit is DUI with a minor in the vehicle. So what additional charges and penalties apply when someone is arrested for DUI with a minor in your vehicle?
Yeah, don't do that. That all of a sudden we're talking about child abuse at a minimum, negligent no injury child abuse, and God help you if you get in an accident with a kid in the car. That we're talking first degree murder. We're talking about vehicular homicide. We're talking about, years in prison. So it's one of those things that you just cannot risk it. I mean, your duty as a parent is to protect those kids, and you don't want to be answering for, a child abuse charge and potentially risking like losing your kid because you wanted to go out and have fun with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything else that you think would be really helpful for people to know that we didn't cover kind of in these little categories of topics when it comes to DUI?
No, I think I covered it.
We covered everything? Okay,
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Ian. Again, this was a great conversation. Thanks to everyone listening, and we'll see you next time.
Likewise.